Okay, so this video is going to talk about the design.md file and what it's doing, and most importantly, how it's driving the outcome of the campaign vault and how that works together. So DesignMD really answers the question, why did we make this choice for every major architectural decision? And it informs the way Claude then responds to requests for further development activity, which I'm constantly making of it as I further refine the campaign vault. It explains why we chose to use vanilla JavaScript instead of a framework-based JavaScript, which I didn't really understand difference for, but it has now worked with me. Why we chose to use Supabase and Netlify as our sort of architecture for managing our ongoing website. What do the roles do and how do they work? What is the data model? What's the philosophy behind it? All of these documented with their trade-offs. So this video will also help you understand the design.md file I am going to be attaching to the release. Okay. So the question is, why did we make this choice? This is what it answers, which ClaudeMD explicitly does not do. And we've sort of covered that in the Claude.md video and the overview, so I won't waste your time by going through it again. But just to note, that is its fundamental purpose. Before you write any code, you need to nail down the vision. So that's this product vision concept. It's the most important concept in any development lifecycle and really important for vibe coding because it's ultimately the thing that defines what you want out of the experience, what you want the solution to do, what you want delivered on the day. So before you write any code, you've got to nail this down. In my case, the campaign vault must be persistent, so it's got to be available all the time. It has to be able to support multi-systems, so Pendragon, Coriolis, other game systems. It has to be aware of the different roles that people take within a role-playing scenario, so GM, player, and viewer. And it had to have low friction, so as easy as possible to deploy with the least technical complexity on that purpose. So these four principles flowed into every architectural decision that we developed. And also note there was an explicit, it is not a VTT. I was not trying to replicate something like a Foundry or a Roll20 or even a Fantasy Grounds. So understanding that was really crucial because it explained what every architectural decision we made and why we didn't make other decisions, and really helped Claude understand what I was trying to achieve. Okay, so a really good example of that is each stack choice is a trade-off, so everything we do is a trade-off. So vanilla meant there was no build pipeline, so we could just drag and drop information directly into Netlify with the simplest possible way with no dependencies on external frameworks or other things, which I would have struggled to understand. And Supabase gave us Postgres API and authorization out of the box and other elements. So that we could really just trust the tool to do the work that we needed to do. This was also about isolating, in some ways, the dependence on the AI tools. So there's always a usefulness in thinking about, are these things that I need Claude to constantly do for me, or are there better, simpler ways of doing it that already exist? And so for vibe coding, I think that's really critical. Understand what you want Claude to continuously do and understand what you want to be turned into what is known as a programmatic or deterministic outcome as quickly as possible, and use platforms and tools to do those things. The role system wasn't arbitrary. As you'd understand if you do any TTRPG, these concepts are really important to everything and really important to information management. So I wanted to allow viewers, I have a couple of people who don't mind watching the odd YouTube video I do on my games, and I wanted to give them access to the site just as viewers, so they can see all of the non-proprietary information that I have on the site. They can look at session notes and other things and have a bit of a read. They can't edit anything, but they can read. Players, of course, can see proprietary information that I share on the site just for my players' access. So for instance, rule guides and other things like that. and they can create and edit their own player character sheets and their own session notes and all of those sorts of things. And then finally, GMs have ultimate control and can do everything. So we also established, so to underpin that, that meant we had to create concepts like owner ID so that we could distinguish between different players, which is not how it started, by the way. In the initial build, I just had one ID, for want of better language, for players, one ID for GMs, and one ID for viewers. But over time, I found that was just too limiting. And the GM doesn't manually create accounts. They use a sort of managing player modal, which is a little function that I built into the website so I can sort of invite new players over time. So with the multi-system design, we really had to think about how we would handle this problem of multiple character sheets and multiple game systems. So in working through that with Claude, we really identified that we didn't actually want a generic character sheet, that such a concept was kind of facile. We actually just wanted character sheets per campaign, and that is the heart and soul of the entire design decision. So everything pivots around that assumption when it comes to design. If you need different character sheets for different games, then you have completely different rule sets potentially, which means you manage each of those systems separately. So all of that's built into this design decision. And once again, so when I run or decide to build a new module into my campaign wiki, if I'm running a new TTRPG, I use this logic to enable me to build that out really quickly, and when Claude starts to build, it knows to do that. The next one is this tier system, but what became apparent was I might run one-shots. And if I wanted to run a one shot, for those of you who don't know what a one shot is, that is literally like a 3 hour session of a single game. I probably didn't want to spend 20 hours of hard yards building out my whole campaign wiki. So I have this two-tier system now. So in one scenario, tier one, we just link off to a Google Sheet or to a PDF, and people can have a character sheet, and they can take some session notes and see some shared information about the campaign we're running or about the session we're running, like maps and other things. But I don't have to then develop an entire character sheet structure around that. So that is kind of generic, but freed from the character sheets, and that came late in the piece. And then obviously where we'd actually started, which was that tier two, has the full custom sheet that allows me to build everything. And that's a selection I can make now when I'm first doing something, and I tell Claude whether we're doing a tier one or a tier two, and it knows to ask that question when we're developing a new one. Okay, the data model had to make some really pragmatic decisions, and I had to really decide what that would look like. And so there's a whole stack of implications in the data model. Several text fields actually store HTML because we did rich text. So we could have created a separate HTML table, but that would have really added a lot of complexity and it would have been complex. So working with Claude, we established that the right approach would be to create that as an embedded element within the tables that we're constructing it. And then there's a really common pattern for what those rich text fields look like. So it knew how to build those and built them in. Then we had to work out how to add those new systems that we were talking about earlier. So it built a checklist, which is defined in the design pattern, and it creates a new system. Then it creates a new character sheet table. Then it writes that JS file. It adds a cache. And it builds that character overview branch. So it does a whole stack of things off the back of that decision. So this is for tier two specifically, by the way, with that character sheet component. Good design documents don't just show why you made choices, but what patterns you expect future builds will follow. So this follows my really strong belief that you're always building for the next consumption. And I also talk about this in my operational management video, but it's always useful to think of Claude as being super forgetful. So you're almost dealing with new instances of the same developer partner at every step of the way. And so with that in mind, we have these reusable patterns. And we have this all being held in the document so that it can pick those things up and reuse those patterns. Otherwise, it'll forget them. It won't remember, and it'll do the same piece of work in a slightly different way. And actually, if you're watching these videos, you'll see that because I couldn't be asked fixing it, but because it wasn't that big a deal. But the top sort of what is the purpose of this slide piece now has a different formatting to the way it did in the other video that I've done for the same purpose, because I wasn't controlling that and Claude made slightly different decisions on how it would do that. So it's a really simple example of what we're talking about. And also making sure that we understand, so the design document also holds the concept of not all design decisions are final, and actually we may have things that we want to do differently in the future, and so it identifies those trade-offs. So there was a concept of trade-offs in the operational overview. What are the trade-offs we're making? Some of those become potential fixes in the future. I might decide to go a different path after a period of time. And so it picks that up and holds it. And one really important point is, which I think I make in the overview video, I'm constantly cleaning this stuff up. So there was actually 13. Yeah, there was a total of 13. These are the last two at the moment standing. So I've knocked out the others either by deciding they're completely fine and I don't mind that trade-off, or by actually making a change to the design over time to address that risk. So finally, and to repeat, design.md isn't something you read cover to cover. It's a reference so that when we're making design decisions, we know what design decisions have been made in the past, what design decisions we plan to make in the future, and really driving a vision for when we're building a new architecture or a new campaign, in my case. Go and read this and make sure we've paid attention to all of these moving parts and applied them in the same way we've applied them in the other campaigns, or tell me how they have to change as a result of a new campaign. So for instance, a really simple example is, obviously when I did the first campaign, I had a dice rolling mechanism for that campaign. Now, dice rolling changes in every TTRPG quite frequently, so it had to become more flexible over time, and so the design.md file had to hold a more complicated concept of systems and campaigns and developed that as a response to those sorts of requirements. Okay, so per the comments from the overview, design this design presentation covers examples from Designs MD, which is why which is why we made the choices we did around things like vanilla JS, why Supabase, how roles work, why character sheets are system specific, how those extension patterns work. Design MD is the rationale. Claude MD provides the operational playbook that then takes that and moves it forward. And the wiki is where we find the procedures and patterns together. So once again, to repeat, together they form that complete system where decisions are explained, workflows are documented, and patterns are discoverable. Okay, on that note, thank you very much.